So week 15 of the NFL season featured some very unfortunate season-ending injuries to a team whose defense is already basically depleted, multiple players making costly mistakes, including a veteran that had no business doing so, a very scary on-field incident, a trick play end up in complete disaster, and so much more. So let's dive into the craziness that was week 15 of the NFL season, right after... Alright, first up, now that the Jets are eliminated from the playoffs, they can finally perform how everybody expected them to all along, offensively without any pressure. Old man Rodgers was feeling frisky and he showed off the wheels on Sunday, rushing 6 times for 45 yards, which, believe it or not, actually led the team. That's right, he joined Tom Brady as the only other players in NFL history to lead their team in rushing past the age of 40. And in terms of him throwing the ball, he had 3 touchdowns and nearly 300 yards, with most of that coming from Davante Adams. Adams had his best game of the season by far, exploding for 198 yards and 2 touchdowns on 9 catches, including this 71-yarder that came on a beautiful ball from Rodgers late in the fourth quarter. Brian Thomas Jr. was trying to keep pace with Davante, and he finished with 10 grabs for 105 yards and a pair of touchdowns himself. But 2 INTs from Mac Jones was too much for them to overcome, as the Jets ended up winning 32-25. Both these teams' seasons are done, and I think the Jags might be the real winner here, as this game almost guarantees they'll finish with a higher draft pick than New York. Meanwhile, it's looking like their first-round pick in BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr., is their wideout of the future. He's first in receiving yards among all rookie wideouts through 15 weeks this season. He has roughly 50 more yards than Malik Neighbors on 26 less catches and double the touchdowns with 8. The other team in New York, though, the Giants, are trying their damnedest to secure that top pick in the upcoming draft. They offered themselves as practice dummies for the Ravens on Sunday, getting blown out 35-14. Lamar almost broke a sweat while going off for 290 yards and 5 passing touchdowns while throwing only 4 incompletions. That is insane. Now, that is his 6th game with 5 or more touchdown passes and 0 picks, and he became just the 3rd player to do that 6 times, with the other 2 QBs being Tom Brady and Drew Brees. So yeah, some pretty good company to be in. Not only did he dominate through the air, but he also rushed 6 times for 65 yards as well. And this is pretty funny. On one of those runs, you can see Lamar using his left hand to make sure his pants didn't fall down. He's just casually trotting along, picking up a nice gain, while also trying to make sure he doesn't go viral for all the wrong reasons. That's some high-level QB play right there. What's crazy is Lamar might be having a better season than his previous 2 MVP campaigns, yet still might possibly lose out to Josh Allen, which is a compliment to how well both of these guys are playing right now. More on Allen in a bit, but another QB who's been playing at a high level all year is Joe Burrow. He did throw 2 picks on Sunday, but his 271 yards and 3 touchdowns were enough to elevate Cincy over the Titans 37-27. Will Levis was out there feeding families. This man threw 3 picks, with his last one resulting in a pick 6 as Geno Stone snagged it and took it to the house. Yeah, it was a turnover extravaganza on Sunday, with both teams combining for 10 turnovers, which was the most in an NFL game since 2007. In fact, it was a turnover party, to say the least, across the entire league here. Teams committed a combined 51 turnovers on just Sunday alone, and that's the most in a single day since December of 2016. But back to the game. That last interception got Will Levis benched, and Mason Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, came in to finish the job. He too threw a pick, but overall played a much better game with over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in the second half alone. However, it was too little too late as they fell to the Bengals 37-27. It's also too little too late for the Bengals and their playoff hopes, as the Broncos won on Sunday. That made it even harder for them to get in, and even if by some miracle Cincy does end up finding a way to sneak into the playoffs, their defense is gonna definitely lose them the game, especially if they keep making idiotic plays like their safety Jordan Battle did here in the 3rd quarter. He scooped up a fumble and returned it roughly 60 yards for a would-be touchdown, but not really, because he fumbled the ball by letting it go before crossing the goal line. And yeah, just an awful Awful play by him, and believe it or not, this isn't the only game where this exact thing happened. Denver ended up crushing the Colts on Sunday in what was a must-win game for Indy, but Jonathan Taylor, the veteran running back, definitely played a big role in their loss because he, just like Battle, fumbled the ball before crossing the goal line on this would-be 41-yard touchdown run. That would have had the Colts up 20-7 in the third quarter, but instead, Denver got the ball at the 20. That's unacceptable for a veteran. Jonathan Taylor, leader of the team, can't happen. Anthony Richardson also didn't help things, completing just 17 of 38 passes for 172 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 picks. The game was put completely out of reach in the fourth quarter on one of the wildest failures of a trick play I've seen in quite some time, when AR threw this screen to A.D. Mitchell, who then fired it back in the direction of Richardson on a double pass, but Nick Bonito jumped it and took it 50 yards for the score. That really flipped the game on its head, and the Broncos went on to win 31-13 as they improved their odds to make the playoffs to 91%. Bo Nix does need to clean some things up, though, before the playoff run, because after throwing just 2 interceptions through 10 games, he's now thrown 5 in the last 2. Moving over to the NFC, the Washington Commanders also helped their playoff odds on Sunday after they escaped with a win in a nail-biter over the Saints. Washington was up 20-13 with 2 minutes remaining when they sent out Greg Joseph to try a 54-yard field goal, which would have basically sealed the game. Well, he missed it wide right in typical Tyler Bass fashion, and the Saints went marching right down the field, and with time expiring, Spencer Rattler found Foster Moreau to give the Saints a chance to take this game into overtime or go for the 2. Well, they went for the 2-point conversion and fell short when Rattler couldn't connect with Jawan Johnson here, and that was all she wrote. Commanders win 20-19. I know some people will hate that decision to go for 2 there, but considering the Saints were 5-8 and playing without their starting quarterback, I think if you have the chance to win the game right then and there, you gotta go for it. Jaden Daniels added to his impressive rookie campaign, going 25 of 31 for 222 yards and 2 touchdowns. That both went to Terry McLaurin. Scary Terry led the team in targets, catches, yards, and touchdowns, and is continuing to reap the benefits of having a great quarterback for the first time in his career. It wasn't necessarily a must-win game for the Commanders, but it did raise their odds of making the playoffs to 82% as they hold on to that final wildcard spot in the NFC. The Bucs did themselves a huge favor by beating the Chargers very badly on Sunday. We'll just put it that way. It was an ass beating, but we'll just say very badly. The Bucs went into LA and put up 40 points and over 500 yards against the Chargers and their defense that's been one of the best in the entire league this season. The Chargers were actually up 17-13 at the half, but Mike Evans got loose for this 57-yard touchdown, and the Bucs never looked back. They outscored the Chargers 27-0 in the second half as they got the win to keep some separation between them and Atlanta in the NFC South. Baker was making his 100th start in this game, and he definitely showed up for it as he completed 22 of 27 passes for 288 yards and 4 touchdowns. The ageless wonder, Mike Evans, went off in this one, catching 9 passes for 159 yards and 2 touchdowns, and we are officially on Mike Evans' watch. After Sunday's game, he has 749 yards on the season, which means he needs 251 more yards across their last 3 games to keep his 1,000-yard streak alive and well. The Miami Dolphins are alive, but not well. They struggled big time against the Texans on Sunday, Tua especially. He threw 3 interceptions, including this one that came on the first play of their last drive when they had a chance to tie it up and send the game to overtime. The Texans offense struggled as well. They didn't even top 200 yards on the day, but they did have just 1 turnover compared to Miami's 4, and that proved to be the difference in this one, as turnovers often are. Nico Collins, heading into this game, was averaging 104 yards a game, but finished this one with just 17 yards on 4 catches, but he did manage to score 2 key red zone touchdowns, which helped them ultimately get the dub. And with that win, the Texans officially clinched the AFC South, and as of right now, their prize is a wild card game against the Ravens, so Merry Christmas. The Dolphins are pretty much as good as done after that loss, and you can see here their playoff probability is now at just 6%, with them being 6-8. Now, real quick, before I move on to the next matchup, I do want to talk about this because there was a scary moment in this game when Dolphins receiver Grant DuBose took what was believed to be a shot to the helmet in the third quarter and went down. He was down on the field for 11 minutes, receiving medical attention. They eventually put his neck in a brace, placed him on a stretcher before taking him to a local hospital. Well, we did get some good news on Monday when the Dolphins posted on X saying he has movement in all of his extremities and he's gotten positive results on some initial testing. He's still in the hospital, at least as of when I'm recording this video at around 11:15 in the morning on a Tuesday, but it looks like he suffered what's being labeled as a severe concussion, most likely from his head hitting the turf and not a helmet-to-helmet hit. Will Kunkel of Fox 26 Houston also shared the CAT scan was clean and he's awake and doing much better, which is great news. Next up, the Cooper Rush-led Cowboys went into Carolina on Sunday, where the Panthers were actually favored to win and gave the Panthers an absolute beatdown 30-14. Cooper Rush threw for over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, with CeeDee Lamb being his go-to guy, catching 9 passes for 116 yards and a tutty. They leaned on Rico Dowdle heavily, and he delivered, rushing for 149 yards on 25 carries. The Panthers couldn't get out of their own way, and after playing better football as of late, Bryce Young really took a step back in this one. He was 19 of 28 for over 200 yards and a touchdown, but he threw 2 interceptions and lost 2 fumbles. Now, speaking of quarterbacks turning the ball over, famous Jameis Winston put on a clinic Sunday afternoon as he threw not 1, not 2, but 3 INTs against the Kansas City Chiefs. I broke this down in much greater detail in my main channel, How About Those Chiefs? Check it out if you want more. But basically, the Chiefs controlled this entire game. They went up 21-0 early in the third quarter after Xavier Worthy scored on this quick pass from Mahomes. It was actually ruled a rushing touchdown since apparently it was a backwards pass, but that doesn't look backwards to me. Who really cares, though? The Chiefs went on to win 21-7, helped greatly by winning the turnover battle 6-0. 4 INTs by both quarterbacks combined. A fumble, actually 2 fumbles recovered. One was on special teams, but that helped the Chiefs move to 13-1 on the season, and they have the best record in the league. However, all eyes are on Patrick Mahomes after he left Sunday's game with an ankle injury. There's obviously some concern here as Mahomes has had multiple ankle injuries throughout his career, but Ian Rappaport said that Mahomes was diagnosed with a mild high ankle sprain and is considered week to week. So that's some good news, at least that it's not more severe than that. But the Chiefs play this Saturday against the Texans, then on Christmas Day the following Wednesday. So you've got that 3 games in an 11-day span. Certainly not ideal for a week-to-week injury with Mahomes and his ankle, especially when they're trying to fend off the Bills for the 1 seed. Speaking of which, the Bills were just involved in what was certainly the game of the week and one of the best games of the entire year, if you like games that involve 0 defense being played, and that happened to be against the Detroit Lions. The Bills jumped out to an early 14-zip lead and held on to it throughout, never letting Detroit take the lead at any point in the game. Dan Campbell got desperate, down 10 with 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and his defense basically completely depleted and opted to go for the onside kick, but Mac Hollins snagged it and almost scored a touchdown to set up this short touchdown pass to Ray Davis. The Lions did end up getting within 6, but the Bills held on and won it all 48-42 in what was the highest scoring game of the year. Now, just last week, the Bills were involved in what was the highest scoring game at that time when they lost to the Rams 44-42. The Lions and Bills have the first and second highest scoring offenses in the league, so it's only right that this game went down the way it did. Josh Allen put on his Superman cape again in this one, throwing for 362 yards and 2 touchdowns, as well as rushing for 68 yards and another 2 touchdowns on the ground. Jared Goff played out of his mind as well, throwing for nearly 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. Amon-Ra St. Brown went nuclear, catching 14 passes for 193 yards and a touchdown. But it's hard to win when your defense gives up 48 points. Their defense was very banged up, to say the least, after having a litany of injuries heading into the game. They then proceeded to lose 4 more starters to injury, with most, if not all of them, potentially being out for the year. Their star defensive tackle, Alim McNeil, sadly tore his ACL and is out for the season. Cornerback Carlton Davis fractured his jaw and is expected to miss at least 6 weeks. Another cornerback, Khalil Dorsey, was transported to the hospital after suffering a gruesome leg injury. His season is definitely done, and if that wasn't enough, running back David Montgomery had an MCL injury and is set to undergo season-ending surgery. Just look at this. These are all the players on defense alone that are currently out due to injury, with a lot of these guys being key starters. So while their offense may be the best in the league, I'm not too confident in their ability to go the distance, at least in a deep playoff run, if their defense is going to be giving up 30 to 40 points every week. Josh Allen also got a little banged up as well near the end of the game when he was tackled and his shoulder hit the ground pretty hard. He got a precautionary x-ray after the game, but said he didn't feel any pain afterwards. Either way, it's something to monitor, as is their defense, a defense that's given up 86 points in the last 2 weeks. Next up, let's go out to Philly where the Eagles and Steelers squared off in the Battle of Pennsylvania. Jalen Hurts and the boys put all the noise to bed about their passing game being in shambles and there being friction in the locker room because Jalen Hurts played one of his best games of the season against one of the top defenses in the league. He threw for over 290 yards and 2 touchdowns while completing 25 of 32 passes. A.J. Brown went off and had 8 catches for 110 yards and a score, while Devontae Smith also had himself a day, snagging a team-high 11 passes for 109 yards and a score of his own. Gotta give credit to the defense as well for holding Pittsburgh to just 56 rushing yards and not allowing Russ to cook either, as he had just 128 yards and 1 touchdown. Pittsburgh's definitely missing George Pickens out there on offense. He's missed the last 2 games with a hamstring injury, and we'll see if he misses a third as this week progresses. But with that, the Eagles took care of business, getting the convincing win, 27-13. They moved to 12-2 on the year with a legitimate shot at the 1 seed after Detroit ended up losing to the Bills. Now, a team that's just trying to make the playoffs in general is going to be the Arizona Cardinals, who after Sunday's win against the Patriots improved their chances to do so. James Conner was running wild against New England, turning 16 carries into 110 yards in Arizona's only 2 touchdowns of the game. Kyler Murray was efficient, going 23 of 30 for 224 yards, with Trey McBride leading the team in receiving as he finished with 9 catches for 87 yards. And even though McBride is having a great season, this man cannot find the end zone to save his life. Get this, he has 86 receptions and 963 yards on the year, both of which are the most for a player without a touchdown this season. As for the Patriots, even though they lost and their season is long gone, they can rest assured knowing that they have their quarterback of the future. Drake May is just the 5th QB since 1950 to have over 1,500 passing yards, 10 or more passing touchdowns, and more than 300 rushing yards in his first 8 career starts. The only other quarterbacks to have accomplished this are Jalen Hurts, Deshaun Watson, Cam Newton, and Dante Culpepper, so a very rare list indeed. And once they get Drake some weapons and an improved O-line, I wouldn't be surprised to see him become a top quarterback in the league here within the next couple of years. And then the Seahawks not only lost the lead in the NFC West, but they also had a bit of an injury scare with their QB1. Geno Smith went down with a knee injury in the 3rd quarter of Sunday Night Football's matchup against the Packers and did not return for the rest of the game. Mike McDonald said on Monday morning that there was some optimism regarding the knee issue. Seems like everything's fine and intact. And he also made it seem like not only would Geno Smith practice, but he would take the majority of the reps at practice and potentially even play in the next game. Well, hopefully Geno is good to go here ASAP, because Sam Howell came in and did not look great. He completed 5 of 14 passes for 24 yards and threw a pretty ugly interception on top of that. The Packers, meanwhile, were in complete control of this game as Jordan Love threw for over 229 yards and a couple of tutties. That and a near 100-yard game plus a touchdown from Josh Jacobs allowed Green Bay to cruise to the finish line, winning 30-13. They moved to 10-4 on the year and are just 1 win away from clinching a playoff spot. The Seahawks, though, dropped to 8-6 and are tied with the Rams in the NFC West, but the Rams beat them a few weeks back, so they have the head-to-head tiebreaker for now. These 2 teams play each other week 18, though, so hopefully Geno is healthy enough to get Seattle some wins, so that game Week 18 against LA actually matters. After that, 2 Monday Night Football games went down last night, with the first being the Vikings and the Bears. It was not a great game overall from a fan standpoint because the Vikings dominated this game basically all 4 quarters. Chicago never stood a chance with the Vikings jumping out to an early lead thanks to this Justin Jefferson touchdown, who after scoring had a little message for Randy Moss, who is currently battling cancer. It definitely wasn't the cleanest game. Both teams combined for 19 total penalties on the night, and even though Sam Darnold didn't have his greatest night and missed some throws here and there, he still finished with 231 yards and a touchdown plus 1 pick that came on a 4th down. Really wasn't that bad of a turnover. You either turn it over on downs right there or try to force a pass with pressure bearing down on you. Caleb Williams was only sacked twice, but but he ran for his life, as he often does, behind that O-line the majority of the game. Jonathan Grenard had 7 pressures himself plus a strip sack, and those 7 pressures led the team by far. He's now up to 56 on the year, which is tied for the 9th most in the NFL. Minnesota easily won this one 30-12 as they moved to 12-2 on the year, tying the Lions and Eagles for the best record in the NFC. And believe it or not, the Vikings have a real shot at getting the 1 seed here down the stretch, as they fight really with the Eagles and the Lions. The next Monday night game was one that probably should have not been in prime time. It was the Falcons taking on the Raiders. Kirk Cousins hit Drake London on this 30-yard touchdown at the end of the first quarter, which was his first touchdown pass since all the way back in week 9. He's also thrown 8 interceptions in that span. So I think Atlanta came into this game with their focus on running the ball and not leaving it up to Kirko chains. They ran the ball 37 times with Bijan Robinson racking up 125 yards on 22 carries. Meanwhile, Kirk threw just 17 passes, completing 11 of them for 112 yards, that 1 touchdown to Drake London, and an interception that came on the very first play of the second half. For the Raiders, Desmond Ridder got the start against his former team with Gardner Minshew out for the year, and Aiden O'Connell working his way back from a bone bruise in his knee. But yeah, Ridder definitely struggled with Atlanta's defense, and he finished 23 of 39 with 208 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 picks. His second interception came on the final series with the Raiders driving in Atlanta territory looking to score the go-ahead touchdown. He had 2 cracks at the end zone from the 35 and honestly threw 2 pretty good balls that at least gave his receivers a chance. But on the final heave, Jesse Bates called game and picked it off. Falcons win it 15-9, snapping a 4-game losing streak. The Raiders, meanwhile, they're trying to get that first overall draft pick after they allowed the Falcons to block a punt. They blocked an extra point as well, and they also got a safety when trying to run the ball out of shotgun from like their own 1-yard line. Good God. And with that, those are some of the craziest games, takeaways, stats, you name it, from Week 15 of the NFL season. Let me know some of your standout performances, teams you think could make a late playoff push, how you feel like the Bills are looking in the AFC compared to the Lions in the NFC. And with that, I'll see y'all next time.